Well, hey, everybody, Mike Griffith here. Welcome to our Ingles on the Beat segment every Tuesday right around here, this lunch hour, 12:30. Very pleased today to bring on Peter Burns. You probably recognize Peter from his work as an SEC Network anchor, obviously hosting the SEC Now program as well as SEC This Morning, does a little Sports Center, a little College Football Live. Peter, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, man, he got me out of having to be quarantined with the kids downstairs for a little bit, Mike. So I appreciate that. Although I don't know, I had to wear a hat, man. The no haircut thing is starting to. I mean, look at this thing. It's starting to get a little bit out of control right now, to say the least. So
better call those ESPN police on you, man. You guys look so perfect on this set. I always wonder, how do these guys do it? There's not a hair out of place. You look so perfect on the set. I mean, seriously, how tough is it to set up and be that on every time you're on in front of the whole country?
I gotta be honest with you, it's all makeup. That's what helps, man. It's the nicest my skin has felt that I haven't worn makeup in like 2 months. But no, it's fun, man. I think that's kind of what we've understood from all of this pandemic stuff too, is about like what a normal workflow in life was. And now, like for us, like, I mean, this is kind of my studio now instead of the SEC Network. I mean, this is my home office. And, whenever we're doing shows for SEC Network, SEC Now and stuff, we're having to be our own IT people. We're used to having people kind of set up all the mics and everything like that, and our camera guys. And that, now I'm kind of messing with this. And hey, is the voice sound good and stuff like that? So it gives you definitely a new appreciation of the things we took for granted. And obviously, college football and spring football were naturally one of those things.
No doubt. We're very fortunate to have producer Michael Carvel back in Atlanta that helps us with all of our stuff at Dog Nation. It's amazing how much stuff we've been able to do as we've kind of evolved. I mean, the new normal on the other side of this, whatever it is, we're going to be different, right? I mean, we're going to be different in the media, but Peter, we're also going to be different as far as football goes. And I guess let's just go ahead and start there. Everybody kind of has an idea of what it's going to look like, when it's going to start up. And I don't know about you, but my idea changes every day. It's just like Greg Sankey said. It's a very fluid process. They're building the bridge as they cross the creek. That's the famous Greg Sankey quote from this. Where it sits right now, I'm still optimistic there's going to be a football season. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, the question is that like, is it the power of positive thinking, or is it rational thinking? And I think I think everyone feels the same way. Like here on Dog Nation and all of our people over at SEC Network and our shows in Sirius XM, it's like they wake up one day and they're like, man, I read this headline that makes me think we're not going to get college football this upcoming fall. Then you read another headline and be like, all right, well, this state might be opening up soon, and so what does this mean? And so again, I one of the things I do appreciate about is how I think Sankey and some of the other commissioners have looked at this. And I really like what Adam Silver has done as well on the NBA level and say, listen, for the Hawks to come by and play basketball and stuff like that, like I don't have enough information to give you a date. Like all these commissioners and stuff, they could give you a date right now, and it doesn't mean jack squat, right? Because everything kind of changes within 48 hours. And, even talking to the coaches as well, too, they don't know. And I think for this first couple of weeks, we saw Mike Gundy make these comments about, they'll be back on May 1st. And we saw Dabo, like, we're going to kick this thing in the ass and stuff like that. And it's like, I think now the coaches are understanding, like, all right, relax, calm down. Let's just try to figure out what's going on. And how can you use this time, not to complain about it, but to get your team ready for, hey, when we snap our fingers, is your team going to be ready to go? And Georgia's probably maybe the biggest question marks of all the teams in the SEC, Mike, that need that, because they're on the prefaces of this great recruiting class. You get Todd Monken, you get Jamie Newman in, like, hell, we're super excited to see what Kirby is going to bring down to Athens this year.
Yeah, no doubt. And Kirby's talked about that. He kind of lamented. Kirby doesn't look back very often, Peter. That's one of his secrets. He's incredible with his time efficiency and his time management. That's kind of the Kirby Smart thing, is he doesn't waste a movement or an action looking back. But he did allow himself to say, wow, if we had Jake Fromm right now, we'd feel like we were doing pretty good because we'd have this experienced quarterback and this pro-style offense. he was waxing poetic during the virtual G-Day game where they replayed the Notre Dame game and Kirby was live.
Which I thought was really cool, right? I mean, the fact that I think sometimes, and I've taken Kirby to task on this, at least during the season, that I'm like, hey man, I think he wants it so bad that sometimes it permeates to the team to where sometimes they feel a little tight, especially like the South Carolina game last year. And I love to see that because you know that if you've spent enough time with Kirby's a good dude, man. Like Kirby's the guy you want to hang out with during the quarantine. Like he's just a guy. And so to see that side of him, I thought was really cool and what they were able to do in that virtual G-Day.
Yeah, he's all about the focus. He's all about every game being the biggest game, right? I mean, they don't build up the one rivalry and the other. And I do think at Georgia, you know, I don't know if I'd call it tight. I would say that there's focus. And that South Carolina game, I mean, boy, it was such a frustrating afternoon. Georgia had almost 500 total yards, but, you know, 3 turnovers, a pick 6. I mean, it was 2 missed field goals. It was the perfect storm. Javon Kinlaw probably made himself millions of dollars. Let me detour towards the NFL draft right now. We'll get back to Georgia. We'll get back to college football future. But when we look at this upcoming NFL draft, of course, the SEC is going to dominate the first round, as they always do. There'll be more SEC draft picks this year than any other conference. But I want to ask you specifically about quarterbacks. We're talking Joe Burrow, Tua Tagovailoa, and Jake Fromm.
Jake Fromm, yeah.
Of those 3 guys, 5 years from now, who's going to have the best career 5 years from now?
It's funny because I think who has the most consistent career, believe it or not, is actually going to be Jake Fromm. And the only reason why I said that is because I do believe that Joe Burrow, they're going to rush him to start day one for the Cincinnati Bengals. And I don't think they have enough tools around him. And I think Burrow is going to struggle. In fact, Peyton Manning told Burrow that earlier this week and says, dude, like, I hope you set the record and get past the record that I had for the most interceptions. Remember, because Peyton was horrendously bad in his first year, but he grew from that. And I think Tua won't really get a chance to see much of the field early. And I think for Jake's going to go to a team to where he there's no expectations for him, right? Like he can get there. He'll probably be a mid-round pick to where, hey, learn the offense and be a good team player. And every time that I'd go down there, from the first practice I was down there, Mike, and you know this about Jake too, the guy's a freaking leader. Like, you know, no matter what type of business you're running, you want a kid like Jake Fromm being a part of your team because like people gravitate towards him. So in a weird way, I can see, you know, Tua and Joe being kind of like more of a gamble pick than Fromm, compared to where Fromm's going to be picked is probably more of a backup quarterback. I mean, between the two, I'm so curious about what happens with Tua in the draft. I think it's just completely shocking to me that they have Justin Herbert above him in some of the mock drafts. I mean, if you look talent wise, it's not even close. Like it ain't even close. And I think of all years, if I'm the Chargers or if I'm the Dolphins, I have to take him because this could be a quarterback that could be a game programming, franchise determining quarterback for the next decade, especially if it's the Dolphins. Because remember, Brady's now in Tampa Bay and the AFC East is going to be wide ass open.
Yeah, I wonder about Tua the hip. You know, the way he extends plays, you just wonder in the NFL, will the hip hold up? And I guess that's where the gamble is, because I'm with you. The talent is unbelievable. Are there any other SEC players you look at in this year's draft that you expect to go on to Hall of Fame careers? Anybody you've got circled? I mentioned Javon Kinlaw a moment ago. I think he'll be a force in the league.
Yeah, Derek Brown, of course, is another one of those guys as well, too. And I really love Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And I talked to some NFL scouts about him, and they're like, listen, this is the closest comp we've seen to a Maurice Jones-Drew in a while. And a guy like a Ray Rice and a Maurice Jones-Drew catch the ball out of the backfield really well. Very good in pass pro and pass protection right now, which is very important for, rookies to play. If you want a kid to play, I mean, go back and look at, even Sony Michel playing a little bit in his rookie year with the Patriots, is that you got to learn that skill. Clyde Edwards-Helaire already has that skill. And so I like him as well. And I'm kind of intrigued to see Lynn Bowden, the Kentucky wide receiver / quarterback. He had to play it for Mark Stoops' squad, but he was such an intriguing athlete and could do so much. And he has that chip on his shoulder. I think that's actually going to be one of the best values of the draft. He won't go as high as Judy or Ruggs or Justin Jefferson, but I've circled Lynn Bowden Jr. as a kid that I'm maybe personally pulling for and want to see what he can do this upcoming season.
You mentioned some of those LSU players, Peter. You were one of the first people I knew that called the LSU win over Alabama this year. I was one of those that was skeptical. The game was in Tuscaloosa, and you knew what you saw and saw what you liked. But, 5 years from now, is Ed Orgeron going to have another national championship? Will he still be the head coach at LSU?
Yeah, I think he'll be the head coach at LSU for as long as he wants. So, and the reason why I say that is because there's not a spot where Ed Orgeron wants to go. It's not like, all right, I'd love to be here, but man, I always kind of want to dip my toes in the NFL, or I want to dip my toes into this school. Like, this is the match made in heaven for Ed Orgeron. So the bigger question is, can he win a national championship? And I look at this, and that's why I think this year it is so important for them not to take a step back. Because, Mike, they're going to be losing I think 14 starters. And if you go back and look at the years that, Auburn lost 14 starters, and even Florida back in their national championship years, almost always, even LSU back in 2007, when they lost, I think 13 plus starters, each one of those teams had a horrendously bad following year. They either went like 8-5 or 9-3. And so now you start trying to figure out, all right, can you keep this going? Because that's what's been great about even Georgia not winning national titles. Each and every year, they're right there. Alabama, each and every year, they're right there. And I think this draft is huge for Orgeron, because he's going to use that as a huge way to say, you know what? If you come to LSU, you're going to have a lot of fun. The fans love it. We could win a title, something he hadn't been able to say in a while. And I'm going to get you to the NFL. And I think that's why, yes, I do think Ed Orgeron's able to win another national title in the next 5 years.
It's going to be fascinating. They had 16 guys that were at the NFL Combine this year, by far more than anybody else. I believe Michigan, Ohio State with 11, and Alabama and Georgia had 10. So a lot of talent leaving LSU. So who does that leave? And I'm thinking there's going to be a season, maybe abbreviated, but who does that leave to step into that power vacuum? Is it right back to Alabama again? Because that defense, I had some real questions about the Alabama defense, Peter.
Yeah, but even, you and I have talked about this on my show, is if you're ever looking at a season in which defense is going, it's almost, I almost wish, Mike, that we could take 2019 Georgia and have that team and put them into 2020. Because I feel like 2019 was all about these unbelievable offenses, right? We saw what Oklahoma did. We saw LSU, even Alabama to a certain extent. And that really wasn't Georgia's MO, right? And now I look at it going, I think the offense is going to get better with Georgia. But, man, can you imagine this defense that comes back as, 8 starters on the defensive front for them? I think the defense overweighs offense this upcoming year with not having spring football, with probably having a truncated fall practice. And so I look at it and be like, damn, this is the year that Kirby really needed to have last year. Or if he could flip-flop teams, he'd love to have that. But, I think it is a power vacuum. I think Alabama, of course, is interesting. I'm really curious to see what A&M does, because I think there is some success in teams like Florida, who know who their quarterback is going to be in Kyle Trask, like A&M, who has Kellen Mond. Even LSU, to a certain extent, has Miles Brennan, who's been there, hell, it seems like 9 years now. So he's seen it. And I think that's the biggest question mark down in Athens, right? I mean, getting Jamie Newman is going to be great, but putting that combined with Todd Monken, that's a big question mark for the squad.
Yeah, I think if anything, Kirby's going to keep it pretty simple and rely on that championship level defense. And as you said, the preparation time, so many teams missing spring drills. I think Clemson pretty much got all theirs in. Boy, there's another advantage for Dabo Swinney, another break that went their way. I think they were on the verge of their annual spring game. What about Clemson? I mean, I look at the odds makers, Peter, and I see they're the favorite there. Are they the favorite in your eyes to win the national title?
Yeah, I mean, between them and Ohio State, and mostly because of the quarterback position, right? Justin Fields over at Columbus, of course, dog fans know about that. And then Trevor Lawrence. I mean, my goodness, you got two top, probably top 5 picks, if not the top 2 picks of the next year's draft. Now, here's the caveat, though. If this goes a little bit deeper and we don't start in September, let's say we start in early October, or hell, let's say if we talk spring ball and you're kicking off the season, this is crazy to say, but in January, you might not see Trevor Lawrence play. You might not see Justin Fields play. And that changes everything when you're talking about a national championship run. Because if I'm Trevor Lawrence or I'm Justin Fields and I look at it going, all right, well, the NFL's not moving back their draft or the combine and whatnot. Am I going to go out there and play basically in a spring football league to get me ready? Or I might just sit out the entire year, kind of like how players sit out bowl games now. Would you fault them? I mean, it sucks from a competitive standpoint, especially after watching the Jordan documentary where everybody wants to compete back then. But now if a kid's not going to get paid in his name, image, and likeness, would you hold it against him? He's a top 5 pick, Mike, and sitting out if, a spring league of college football? I mean, I don't think I would.
Yeah, everything's on the table. Last week, Greg Sankey was quoted off a Knoxville radio station, a really good interview by Jimmy Himes and John Wilkerson there in WNML, where he was asked about a scenario if one of the conferences wasn't ready to return to the classroom. Of course, there was that call last week where it was pretty much determined that for there to be college football activity, i.e. practice and preparation, students also needed to be on campus. And I don't know about you, but that was one of those days I woke up and said, boy, it's going to be tough to get everybody on the same page. And Sankey said there could be room for discussion for college football, even without some schools. So where would you draw the line? Could there be a season without a Pac-12? Could there be a season without the 4 California teams in the Pac-12, Rutgers and Maryland out of the Big Ten, maybe Boston College out of the ACC? Could you see a season missing some teams like that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I didn't think I'd ever be doing, my television shows from my living room, basically. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know what we envision, but I would say that I think it's definitely more likely that you would see a conference-only schedules. And just seeing how, the college football playoff would be in this world of flux. I mean, how would you pick the 4 if you only had, like LSU? I mean, think about it. Georgia's had these great games against Notre Dame in the last couple of years. All right, well, that wouldn't be there, right? And let's say if LSU and Texas don't play for whatever reason, if the schedules move back or they only play a conference schedule, that's a huge game for both of those teams as well. So, yeah, I absolutely can see it because I think we're starting to see, if I'm not mistaken, like the University of Louisville today started furloughing part of their athletic department. I mean, this is how serious this is getting right now, that I think all cards are on the table. As bad as the hands are, all the cards are going to be on the table to at least get some type of football, because if you don't get football, Mike, you could potentially lose a ton of different sports and really rearrange everything on how Division I sports look and the things that we've learned. Like, I mean, I love Scott Strickland and what he's doing with Georgia baseball and what he's grown that to be. Like, I sure as hell wouldn't want to lose Georgia baseball. And so if I've got to, I want to see football in the fall, but if I got to see it in the spring, which helps me make sure Georgia Gym Dogs and gymnastics are going on, Chris Hack with Georgia men's golf and women's golf, they've had some great programs. Like, I want those things to continue, even if I got to play, just have a conference-only spring schedule, which I think it would be a last-second Hail Mary.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it would be. And as we said, everything on the table, because you are trying, football is the engine that drives that revenue train. I know at Georgia, out of that $150 million annual budget, 85% of that is coming directly from football, contracts with the SEC network as well as ESPN. To me, the whole thing, I mean, we're all in a rush. We're in a rush for our economy. We're in a rush for our science, our health, unprecedented times. And I guess we're all a little stir crazy as we try to figure out how best to manage this. A couple of weeks ago, Nick Saban, with what I thought was a very ingenious idea, is I kind of compared Nick to like a really good crew chief in NASCAR, right? Is he cheating, or is he coming up with new ideas that just aren't in the rule book? But the Apple Watches, and I wear one myself, but having the athletes wear Apple Watches while they work out, so that they can be monitored during the workouts. Now, theoretically, the coaches aren't supposed to have that oversight over a workout. Right. I can see the benefit of this at the same time. What are your thoughts about some of the ingenuity, some of the ideas that people are coming up with to manage their programs throughout?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a doubt. And when you look at these top tier programs, one of the reasons why they've been top tier is they take a look at every single rule and every single thing that's related to college football. And once you've exhausted how you can get an advantage in the X's and O's, you're looking at all the rules and regulations of, hey, what are their legal loopholes that I could use that aren't maybe not necessarily, they're not frowned upon by any means, but you're just like, I never thought of it that way. And that's an outside the box way of doing it. And I saw other coaches complaining. I'm like, are you complaining that it's against the rules? Or are you complaining that you didn't think of it first and that Alabama did it? And so I had Eli Drinkwitz, the head coach of Missouri, go, hey, we don't have everybody with these iPhones and iWatches and stuff like that to monitor it. But I guarantee you he'd like to have it and for all those players. So Will Muschamp, kind of the same thing, because he goes, that's the big difference right now. He can't monitor these guys on whether or not, how far they're staying in shape. So it's those small things, and that attention to detail has always made Nick Saban stand out. This just happened to be the latest way that he's kind of adapted his mindset. And guess what? If he does it, Kirby's probably not too far behind, because, those two are two peas in a pod, to say the least.
Yeah. And, it brings up the discussion is, are the athletes really better off at home, scattered around the country, or would they be better off in a controlled environment where there's medical personnel, doctors, tests every day?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, because we've talked about that with Greg Byrne, the athletic director of Alabama, and others, and Scott Strickland at Florida as well, saying, hey, some of these kids don't have access to great meal plans and even the training facilities, and they're in a safer environment now than, maybe being at home or in a community that has, 150 people, not taking care of the pandemic social distancing part. So it is a delicate balance right now. And again, the state of Georgia is kind of in the forefront of this delicate balance of, opening up the state as of, basically kind of right now. And that's going to be like, they're going to write so many books and research papers on whether or not this was the right move or the wrong move. And really, who the hell knows at this point, Mike? I think that's the most frustrating part about all of this.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Now, a minute ago, I asked you about Ed Orgeron. We've talked about Nick Saban. You mentioned you like Kirby Smart. I want to find out, how much do you like him? How many national titles is Kirby Smart going to win at Georgia? And when are the Bulldogs finally going to break through?
I would be disappointed if he doesn't win at least 2. I mean, Herschel said, hey, he's absolutely winning it this year. And I'm just like, if there's a year that you're going to win it, a kind of a shortened off season might actually help Georgia and not. I mean, why would you pick them any different, even though you're losing so many players on offense, any different than you did last year? I felt like Alabama and LSU were going to make a run last year, and they were so good, but this year is going to set up defensively for right there with them. So again, I think it's a minimum of 2, just because of you're going to always get good players in there, so you're going to be there for a while. It's just a matter of getting the right mix. Is it this year? I don't know. If it is only a spring football season, I think that escalates the opportunity that this could be a year that you have it. But if not, then I think it's probably in 2021, just because you continue to have year in and year out these recruiting classes, you're going to find the right fix. I think Todd Monken coming in was a monster change. I thought that he understood now he needed an offensive play caller to go along with all the Ferraris. I mean, he's got all these Ferraris right now. You just needed to make sure you had the right driver, and I think Monken was a monster hire. I don't think he gets to fully take advantage of that this year, though, because of the lack of time that they had, and just crossover with Alabama, and Florida's going to be good. I think it would be next year as opposed to this year.
Yeah, maybe Kirby takes the restrictor plate off of the engine and
something.
Let's them Ferraris and NASCARs go. Peter, thank you so much for joining us. I enjoy working with you. I always enjoy doing your show. You're doing great stuff on ESPN. Your career has really been fun to follow. And I know you're usually the one asking the questions, but every time I have you on, I'm thinking he needs to be on the other side of the mic answering, because you've got some great football philosophy and knowledge. Thank you again. It means a lot.
Now I just need to get the haircut, and we'll be in good shape. So, Mike, all right. Thanks, bud. I'll talk to you soon, man.
All right. You take care of yourself there in North Carolina. Peter Burns, host of SEC Now and the SEC This Morning program. Peter, a guy you can see on SportsCenter. It means a lot. We talked about friendships, and Peter's a guy that I know in the business and someone that I'm always, working with in my career. You think about our daily lives and who we run across every day. I know that, the people that I see in my community, at my stores, at my Ingles, these are the people that I'm counting on right now. And Ingles did a video I want to show you and really say thanks to these people that are kind of helping us get through these times that, make our lives that much easier with their service and the quality that they provide us every day.
It's in our hearts to feel for you. There's been ups and downs, turnarounds, good days and some bad. But we stand together for worse and for better. We'll always have your back. With open arms, heart to heart, hand in hand. Community strong.
Well, thank you. And again, thank you to Ingles. Without Ingles, I wouldn't be able to do this program. We do it every time, every Tuesday around lunchtime. And then, of course, 12:30, 12:45. I do a show Friday nights, the Friday Night Mike Show. And we do a Sunday night show. We had Eli Wolf on this past Sunday night, Michael Barnett the Sunday before that. Now it's kind of your time. I want to turn this over and look at the comments. I see Mike Mizell talking about being fine with Jamie Newman. I agree. And I also agree with Peter that this isn't going to be the year that Kirby takes the restrictor plate off because of the fact that there's going to be a limited amount of preparation. And as Kirby says, you do what you can do. And that means keeping it simple sometimes. But if you can execute, simple efficiency has won national championships before when paired with an outstanding defense, which I think Georgia has. And I'm with Peter. I also believe that it does benefit Georgia. You know, all things being equal, right? Everybody's in the same situation. Because of the way Georgia's built with that outstanding, deep, and complex defenses that can come at offenses in so many different ways, I think that favors teams with great defenses this year because I just don't think you're going to get the same continuity and choreography with the offenses that you would with an entire 15 practices of spring drills and with the build-up to the season. I'm also with Peter on the abbreviated season. Maybe the players and the students don't report back till September, and then you have September to practice, and maybe we're going in October. But again, that's such a moving target, and day by day, my predictions and my thoughts on that change. So take a look and see if y'all have any questions. Now's the time to ask them as I take a look at some of your comments. I see Charles Kaiser giving me some updated news, talk about a decommit. You know, this Friday, the NCAA is going to take a look at this one-time transfer rule. I think this is pretty interesting. I think based on what Kirby has told us before about his philosophy with the transfer portal, most of those players that enter the portal go to schools outside the SEC. Now, Otis Reese was obviously an exception to that rule. Outstanding safety. It's just how deep Georgia is. Otis was able to go to Ole Miss, where he'll play in the transfer portal. But I think most of these one-time transfers will be transferring out probably closer to a school back home, maybe going to a lower level where they can play immediately or a smaller conference. Look at Leslie Waller with the Go Dogs there. A lot of school spirit. Doesn't matter when I do this show, what time of day, what night, I'm always going to see those comments. The Georgia fans, so much spirit. And I've had so many of my friends around the country ask me, hey, Mike, what are you doing now? What are you doing with your time now? I said, I'm doing what I'm always doing. I'm covering Georgia football. There's still things to write about. You know, we mentioned what a great job Kirby did with the virtual G-Day game. I got so excited. I wrote the projected game story on Sunday. I don't know how many people caught that. I don't know how much value there was to it, but it was fun to write how I thought that game might play out. I mean, we all play those games in our mind, right? So that was something that was kind of different. Take a look at your comments here. Henry Duncan wants people to commit to the G. Trent Scarborough, it's good to see you. William Morgan predicting the national championship for Georgia this year. Christopher White, with states reopening, does that mean players can report to school? Christopher, not necessarily. I believe that's going to be decisions that are based on not just conferences. The conferences, I'll put it like this. The conferences had autonomy during the NCAA basketball postseason. So, for example, we saw the Ivy League cancel their basketball tournament on a Tuesday, whereas the SEC actually played on Wednesday. We saw Georgia with that big 18-point win over Ole Miss. Tom Crean, the guys were playing their best at the end of the season. Who knows what would have happened? But they canceled on Thursday. So based on that, listening to what Greg Sankey has had to say, we believe the conferences will have some autonomy in their decisions. And certainly that will go hand in hand with what's determined at the state level. It's not as simple as the state opening up. We know we have private schools, but colleges will also make that decision for themselves. Remember, the University of Georgia closed their campus off before many of the elements of society were shuttered. So not necessarily, Christopher White, that's a good question. I think this reopening is going to be a bit of a test tube for our society. Certainly we'll pay very close attention to see how well we're able to control the virus, to ensure that our society can sustain itself with that invisible enemy out there. It seems so crazy, surreal to talk about an invisible enemy that we're all battling, but we are. And we're doing that by being cautious, by being considerate of one another, wearing the mask in public. Listen, I don't like wearing that, but I know that if I were to cough in a store, someone may become uncomfortable or concerned or have a small child with them. And I know how I would feel as a parent. So right now we do that out of consideration for one another, as well as because we're following guidelines that our experts are putting out on there. I saw where Herm Edwards said on the Paul Feinbaum show that the quarterbacks right now are the doctors and the scientists, and they're calling the plays, and it's up to us to kind of execute that. So hopefully that answers your question. Steve Walden with a great point. This will be reevaluated June 1st. Greg Sankey has made that point repeatedly. Is anxious and as eager as we all are to know what's going to happen, there's no way to make an informed decision on that right now, and we don't have to as of April 21st. We have the benefit of time, and who knows what advances we will make and how much more we will learn about how to control the invisible enemy, the coronavirus, how we're going to legislate this, how the students can come back in a safe atmosphere. And then there's that word safe. I said this morning on Bill King's radio show in Nashville. What is safe? Is safe a 1 out of 1,000 death rate? Is it 1 out of 10,000? Everybody has their own definition of safe, just like flying. What is safe transportation? So that's going to be another adjustment for our new normal and for our society, is to ask ourselves, at what point do we feel safe? And it's going to be a different answer for everyone, not just based on your perspective and your background, but based on your age and some other potential health risks that you might have. So there's a lot to this. It's very complicated. One size doesn't fit all. I know there's a lot of complaining and controversy about what state's opening when. And I look at these governors, and I, like, for example, in the state of Georgia, and I recognize that Atlanta is not the same, as the Colquitt County area. There's differences in terms of the demographics and the space. So one size doesn't fit all for this. That's the complication. And that's why I think, to Steve's point, we need to wait as long as we can before we make this decision or make any decisions, cast any decisions in stone, as Greg Sankey said. So they're going to make informed decisions right now. The next media SEC event is the SEC Media Days. As of right now, that event is scheduled to take place in the middle of July in Atlanta. But Sankey is also working on some provisional plans. We may have to do it via audio or via video presentation, but in some way, shape, or form, I would anticipate that in mid-July, there will be some sort of SEC presentation. We've already had the SEC spring meetings canceled. That's an event that takes place the end of May, early June, right there around the same time as the SEC baseball tournament concludes. We know that the Baseball World Series and Women's College World Series, Track and Field National Championship, all the spring championships have been canceled. So that's where we sit right now as we wait to gain more information. And that's exactly what Greg Sankey is doing. Mary Justice with a hello. It's good to see you. Bruce Eklund. Yes, we're glad to have you as well. Looking at these comments here. Jonathan Noodlepots points some fun at Peter Burns. Such a great personality. And I see Bob Fiquette wants to ask Peter, and Peter's no longer with us on the show, but about a guarantee against South Carolina. Listen, I can tell you, being in the predictions business, sometimes you get it wrong. I know that I've had it wrong before for sure. I didn't see that loss to South Carolina coming last season. I thought Georgia would dominate against Notre Dame. I think I said this on my Friday Night Mike show. Fans always ask, who do you root for? Do you root for the team? And I always say, hey, I root for me. And because I had gone on Paul Feinbaum's show that week and talked about how Brian Kelly bragged that playing at Notre Dame was like being on Broadway. And I said, when they come to Athens, the Bulldogs are going to bring the curtains down on the Broadway show. They're going to dominate Notre Dame. There's no way Notre Dame can win this game. And yet here we were in the final 2 minutes, and I'm going, this can't possibly happen, right? There's no way. But I grew up in the Midwest. For those of you that don't know it, I grew up in mid-Michigan. I was born in the South, right? Hence my feelings toward the SEC and why I've wanted to make my career down here. I've been very fortunate to do that. But did grow up in the Midwest, watched a lot of Notre Dame football on TV. There was only 3 or 4 channels. You didn't have a choice. And the luck of the Irish was a very real thing throughout my entire childhood and growing up. And I could not stand Notre Dame as a fan. Back before I got in the industry. Now, of course, I understand what Notre Dame means. I've been to that incredible campus and stadium. It's a bucket list. I know so many Georgia fans went up there in 2017. It's such a phenomenal program for college football. So I no longer have those feelings toward Notre Dame. But that particular night, you better believe I was hoping that Georgia was going to. They didn't cover the 12-point spread. So probably some Bulldogs fans throwing stuff at the screen. That Mike Griffith. He said Georgia was going to win by 2 or 3 touchdowns. They should have. They should have. Brian Kelly and his staff did a great job. So I'm never too hard on people when they make their guarantees because I've been down that road before, and I'm certainly not perfect. Good to see my buddy Jacob O'Neill on here. Jacob's a regular. I always appreciate what he brings to the table. Hurley Jones, if another state opens up college football practice, the teams go to that state and practice there. Not at the SEC level, certainly. Because the rules that have been thrown down for the FBS ranks, at least by the conference commissioners, are that students need to be active on campus before those student athletes can return to activity. So I do think that's interesting as far as maybe you're talking about maybe not team practices, but maybe individual group practices. I think there's already kids that are in different states right now, right? I know that Georgia has a lot of kids from South Florida, and they're working out in South Florida under Florida rules. So I think that's interesting. I'm not sure what the answer to that would be in terms of unsupervised workouts. I suppose you can't really enforce too much if you're a school, and that kind of gets back to what I was saying with Peter when we talk about when is it safe to bring the players back to campus. Well, how safe is it for them not to be on campus, and out there. So Marshall Fleming, I appreciate Marshall being behind me. Marshall's a football guy. He agrees with me and Peter that the defense are ahead of the offense. That's going to be pretty interesting. Who do I think might be the next quarterback, Greg? I'm assuming you're talking about after Jamie Newman. I do think Jamie will be the first one under center this season for the Bulldogs. I can't call that race. Dwan Mathis is due to have an MRI in May, where we expect Dwan will get full clearance for full contact. He can practice right now. Georgia doesn't take their quarterbacks to the ground in hitting drills. Dwan's had some contact, but obviously not with his head. I would be doing a disservice to Dwan and to Carson if I named one of them the next guy, because I need to see him play. And I'm going to go ahead and do the Greg Sankey thing and say, I don't have to decide it right now. And the answer is I really don't know. I think they're both that good. If you read my pretend game story that I wrote on Dog Nation last Sunday, you can see I had both of those guys making plays, good and bad, in what would have been the spring game. So I would really call it a toss-up. I really would. If you guys want to share this video, feel free. We try to get the video out. We had a lot of fun with Peter Burns. He brings a lot to the table. He's a guy based in Charlotte there on the SEC Network. He talks with all the coaches. I thought he gave us a lot of background. Really enjoyed some of the ideas he shared and his perspective on the future of football. Interesting to hear him say he thought Georgia could win a national championship in the next 2 years, and he predicts that Kirby Smart will have 2 national championships over the course of his career. I'm guessing most Georgia fans agree with that. If Georgia gets this thing on track, because of the amount of high school talent in this state, I don't think there's any question that Georgia has the potential to be a dynasty. And now that we're seeing the facilities go up, the $81 million football building, that's full steam ahead. So Georgia now getting their facilities up with the others in the SEC. Remember, their facilities were only ranked 8th. Georgia football facilities ranked 8th in the SEC. before this new football building. So Georgia doing some catch up right now, and you know how hard Kirby works. So listen, I got to close it down. I want to thank everyone for joining me. Thank you to Peter Burns from the SEC Network for being my guest today. Thank you to Michael Carvel. He's juggling a lot back there in Metro Atlanta. He's just an incredible producer. Also, by the way, the guy that brought me back down south a few years ago and hired me. So appreciated that a few years ago, Michael, getting me back in the rocking chair in the football capital of America down here in the SEC. And thank you for watching the program. These programs, aren't much without the interaction, without the comments from the fans. Because when we finish, I'm going to go into this comments section. You guys know this. I'll answer questions that you have, and I'll send messages because you tell me what you want to know. I mean, I have an idea what I think you need to know, but the other half of my job is telling you what you want to know. So please continue to interact with me. Dog Nation, we're going to continue to do these programs and do our best to serve you. And one last shout out for Ingles. Thank you for everything that you do in the sponsorship. Everybody, have a safe and happy week.